an hour and a half, and we'll probably finish at 12:30. So please put your questions in the question box and put your chat in the chat box. And I say this because I'll only be looking at the questions during the event. My colleague Suzanne of Recolite will be taking care of the chat. So if you have any technical or other issues, put them in there, and Suzanne will do her best to help you. Now, today is just one of a series of webinars. If you miss any of the last 2 years, you can listen to them on a replay on the Recolite website. Simply go there and follow the links. Now, today coming up, we have this year we have 3 webinars. On Thursday, the 23rd of March, we have one called Taking Action Sustainability for Lighting Manufacturers. And we are going to get some prominent manufacturers who will talk us through the measures that they're doing to reduce their environmental impact. On Thursday, the 18th of May, we're going to do a deep dive into Cat A fit outs, and we're going to look at practical solutions that we can do to reduce waste luminaires from the removal of Cat A fit outs and how we can do that. That should be very interesting. And then on Thursday, the 22nd of June, we're going to do another deep dive. This is into the waste regs, your responsibilities. So if you're an importer or producer of lighting products, you have a range of responsibilities and obligations, and we look at how you can stay compliant in that presentation. So we hope to see you at some or all of those this year. And again, you can register at recolite.co.uk. And you can see all our previous webinars are all on the website too, from 2020, 2021. There's lots of really good material still on those, so they're well worth checking out if you want to refresh yourself about some particular aspect of sustainability in lighting, etc. So just talk a little bit about some of the events that we've got coming up. We've got a busy calendar this year. And our big news is that we are launching a special conference on remanufacturing lighting. So this is about reconditioning, reusing, and taking luminaires and closing the loop so they don't just end up as waste. And this is a special one-day conference. It takes place at the Coin Street Conference Centre on the South Bank on Thursday, the 27th of April, 2023. And it was designed really to help you make a success of luminaire reconditioning and reuse. We look to the opportunities, challenges, and it should really help you, equip you, and inspire you to join this coming revolution in the lighting industry. So I commend that to you. It's a one-day conference, so check it out on the website there, and we'd love to see you there. And now another important date for your diary. We're absolutely delighted to announce that the Circular Lighting Live 2023 conference will take place at the Royal College of Physicians in London on Thursday, 21st of September 2022. So that is definitely a day for your diary. Now, we believe this is the UK's biggest event dedicated totally to sustainable lighting. It was an instant success on its launch back in 2022, and we're building on that. It's a bigger venue. It's a beautiful venue. It's got a much larger exhibition area, and we should have a dedicated track just for lighting designers and specifiers. And I should also mention that if you're an independent lighting designer or specifier, you can go free. So we'd love to see you there. And there's more information, www.circularlighting.live. And I should also mention the other events that we're rolling out through the year and have been very popular and people find them really useful is our one-day workshops on lighting product design for a circular economy. Now, these are in person. They're run by Simon Fisher, who's a well-known luminaire and product designer and the founder and director of FMark. And he will go through all the circular economy standard, the specifications, so you can improve your environmental metrics and your standards, etc. And I've spent a day on one of these, and it's really interesting. It challenges the manufacturers around the table, and you learn an awful lot in one day. Now, there's still places at the next one, which is on Wednesday, the 1st of March, and that's in central London. For the details, go to recolite.co.uk and follow the links. And finally, a reminder about the Circular Lighting Report. I'm the editor of the Circular Lighting Report, and this is a guide to the latest developments in sustainable and circular lighting. Some of the stories are very informative and some are quite inspirational, and it just gives you a flavour of all the different things that are going on. And just to highlight a few recent stories that are relevant to today, we had a story that DW Windsor is promoting the fact that they have assessed their Carrum streetlight as achieving an excellent TM66 score for circularity. The Pro S version scored 2.6 in the assessment method, which puts it in the excellent bracket. We also the story that LAMP, the Spanish firm, has published the environmental impact of 2 of its ranges in an open forum. The Barcelona-based company has uploaded environmental product declarations on 2 of its best-selling ranges onto the Open DAP platform. Now, what's interesting about that story is that we're increasingly seeing manufacturers putting their environmental information out there on websites, publishing them, promoting them, advertising, etc. We're also seeing a slight shift in emphasis between, European companies going down a slightly different route to the UK. The emphasis is on TM66 and those standards, and then we're seeing different standards. So it's a fluid situation and very interesting. So to keep up with it, I commend the site to you. And finally, we had a really interesting story this week about a study which showed that a luminaire with replaceable GU10 lamps had a lower environmental impact than one with an integrated LED module. Now, that was a surprising finding of a survey which was prepared by Arup for one of its clients. You can read the full story on Circular Lighting Report. And we hope to have the author of the study, Natalia Duffy, present about the study in a future event, so keep an eye out for that. Now, as I say, you can follow Circular Lighting Report on LinkedIn, or you can visit recolight.co.uk and follow the links. Right, on to the business at hand, and I'm delighted to hand over to Helen to kick us off today. Helen.
Oh, thank you very much, Ray. Great to be with you all, and there's a lot to cover, so we've only got a short amount of time, and I'm going to dive straight in. So my presentation is showcasing the considerations and regulations that are now influencing the design for sustainability within the lighting industry.
And would you like to share your video?
Can you not see my screen?
Let me see your screen, we can't see you.
Oh, okay.
I just want to click on the start video icon at the bottom of your screen.
Right. Screen sharing. It doesn't seem to be there.
If you mouse over the bottom bar of your screen, you might pop up.
Oh, hang on. Okay.
Yes, indeed. Lovely. Good job. Okay.
Well, I'm not sure it's going to make that much difference, but yeah, I'm happy for you to see that. But what I'm really wanting to get you interested in is these metrics. So we all know that net zero is our ultimate goal, and the UK strategy aims to keep us on track for our 2030 national determined contribution, and also that we will be net zero by 2050. So governments are introducing legislation to encourage us down this route, and the landscape is very confusing at the moment, and different approaches are evolving. These are some of the wider initiatives being adopted by the EU, and the UK is also adopting most of these in various formats. And the one I want to talk about first is tax. It's one of the biggest weapons, and it will be a very unavoidable driver. So prior to Brexit, the UK was part of the EU's emission trading scheme known as ETS. And since May of 2021, the UK has introduced its own ETS. Now, the UK ETS applies to energy-intensive industries that involve the combustion of fuels with a total rated thermal input in excess of 20 megawatts. And when they first introduced this, it was £50 per tonne emitted. But if the UK is to meet its really ambitious targets, more needs to be done. And the likelihood is that there will be an emission tax, which will be added to goods and services when we buy them. But currently, the UK levies taxes on carbon through duties on petrol and diesel. But for the general consumer, there is little more in place. However, the EU's Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, or CBAM, is a key development for carbon taxes. The CBAM will function as an EU border levy, and put simply, certain products coming from a country with a lower carbon price than the EU will have a new border tariff to pay. Another driver is corporate social responsibility, known by the acronym CSR. Again, it will start with the larger companies, and initially there are directives on reporting, but there's no doubt it will lead to taxation. Within lighting, of course, operational carbon emissions massively outweigh any embodied carbon. So until now, operational efficiency has been a focus, and we know that LED adoption has helped in this massively. But now we are shifting. Standards and regulations regarding the product are probably what is concerning everyone at the moment. So I would like to define what they all are. Regulation is a government ruling which is adopted under law. Standards, however, go into much more detail, and these are usually compiled by the industry to assist all our relevant professionals in meeting best practice. Now, these are not legally binding, but sometimes they are referred to in an act or a legislation, and then it will become a legal requirement. And a big instance is Building Regulations Part L, and that states that the lighting should be designed on CIBSE's or SLL's lighting handbook or an equivalent design guide, and therefore it becomes part of that regulation. Within the EU, there is a lot of work on directives, which give an objective to EU members to be legally adopted by their national parliaments within a specific timeframe, and then they become a regulation. And unlike a directive, a regulation is binding. Many of these regulations will apply to the UK eventually, so it is very prudent to be aware of upcoming directives. Now, there's also the demand from the building industry itself, and many specifiers are supporting various different metrics for defining the properties of a luminaire. And the ones that I'll cover today fall into three categories. So those calculating carbon, those that can detail circularity, and some for remanufacturing, although some will cover more than one aspect. They don't fall terribly neatly into boxes. And here are a few of the common ones that I'll cover in detail today that are relating to carbon. So how do you navigate all of these slightly different assessments, declarations, and initiatives? And much will depend on your market, but also the specifiers that you're working with. And I would like to start with TM65, as it is one of the most logical. TM65 covers embodied carbon for all products under the headline of building services. Luckily, a new part of TM65 is being written specifically to cover lighting, and Kristina will go over that more after this presentation. ISO 14044, horrible numbers, specifies requirements and provides guidelines for life cycle assessments, including definition of the goal and scope of the life cycle, inventory analysis, the impact assessment, interpretation, reporting, and critical review of the LCA. And there are many different companies that offer to create life cycle assessments. However, criticisms have been levelled against the LCA approach. In practice, an LCA completed by 10 different parties could yield 10 different results. And this ISO LCA standard aims to normalise this. However, the guidelines are not overly restrictive, and 10 different answers may still be generated. Within an EPD, or an environmental product declaration, manufacturers report their comparable, objective, and third-party verified data that show both the good and the bad about the environmental performance of their products and services. And this covers both material and operational health, and it also touches on corporate social responsibility. So it's a very different format. And the EPD consists of two elements. You've got the detailed LCA, topped up and summarised by the EPD, which then becomes a public document, as Ray said earlier. EPDs are useful, to help in achieving EPD and LCA credits in certification schemes like LEED and BREEAM and others as well. So for me, a prudent early solution to this navigation would be to start with the basic versions and then add on when necessary. So TM65 along with TM66 will give you lots of the basic information that you need to build up a life cycle assessment, and then even more will take you on to the environmental product declaration. And the higher level of information for these two formats, LCA and EPD, require common information about the company health, which could be used across the whole product range. So they fit nicely into one another. And this combined approach could be used as a new product range is developed, as early information, or it could be for a project that might be being bid for, and then you have to add more information as you go along the bid stage. There's lots of other tools. These include Cradle to Cradle Certified, and this is used to assess products with science-based measures for material health, product circularity, renewable energy and climate, water and soil stewardship, and then also social fairness. The certification is awarded based on 4 ascending levels of achievement with an independent assessment. The big thing is recertification is required every 3 years, and companies need to show measurable improvement to recertify. Another one is the EcoVadis Sustainability Assessment, and it's an evaluation of how well a company has integrated the principles of sustainability and corporate social responsibility, that CSR, into their business. It's scored on 4 themes: environment, labour and human rights, ethics, and sustainable procurement. So you can see the topics are different to some of the other assessments out there. Now, a really interesting one is the PEP Eco Passport. It's an environmental footprint, and it's very similar to an LCA, but it has defined rules to suit each product category, and also it is independently verified. Now, Lighting Europe is supporting PEP Eco Passports, and their press release made some interesting reading. They say, Lighting Europe has noticed the increased interest in the market and among regulators in life cycle assessment and environmental product declarations, and repeats that these should not become a mandatory requirement. LCAs entail a complex process and significant resources to deliver a lot of information. There will be cases when all of the information is not needed or useful, and where the effort is not justified. And then they continue that Lighting Europe has decided to join the PEP Association and will contribute to review the PEP Eco Passport product-specific rules for luminaires, and that's a section called PSR 0014. And while this is the most mature LCA for general lighting that Lighting Europe has come across to date, it is still not optimal. Their members are currently compiling a list of topics that should be addressed as part of the revision in order to improve and make it more sensitive to the diversity of products and applications. So I think that's a bit of a damning statement, but great that they're on board with one aspect with these PEP Eco Passports, and hopefully they can help develop it to be a useful product for us in the future. And then also there are there's the Green Light Alliance. Now they are supporting life cycle assessments, and although they don't write their own standards, they are providing what they're calling a gathering point between OEMs and designers. So they're helping to understand how to specify and maintain specification of circular products in buildings, and also they're contributing to many of the standards that we've also touched on today, always trying to promote best practice. So now moving on to circularity. TM66 again is one of the easiest. It's a method that determines the circular credentials of a lighting product, and it includes the Circular Economy Assessment Method, or CEAM, which turns a complex subject into an easy to understanding star rating. And this gives manufacturers and specifiers targeted, usable, independent metrics to be able to compare different products and also to strive for improvement. So the scoring in this helps in specification of products that might be used on future lighting design products. And again, Kristina will explain more. One of the standards is EN 4555. It's a series of standards, which also comes under the BS banner. So we've got BS EN 4555. So this series defines many aspects that should be considered to design a truly circular product and then its subsequent further use. And I'd just like to point out to you the second one down, remanufacture, because that comes up again later on. And this is because remanufacturing is now starting to emerge as a green product solution. And there is a point that I would like to share with you. The new Building Safety Act 2022 could have repercussions we might not be aware of, especially for regenerated lighting. One focus is on improving the competence of the people responsible for overseeing, managing, and delivering works to higher risk buildings. Therefore, any refurbished products need to show that they comply with all safety aspects and will probably need a new CE mark before any competent, and that word is the important one, specifier will consider using it. So this point in the Building Safety Act will be supported by BS EN 8887. BS 8887 is designed for manufacture, assembly, disassembly, and end-of-life processing, and now comes under the acronym MADE. And this covers the process of remanufacturing, including the scope of work that is agreed upon. And this is really essential when specifying something that hasn't even been made yet. It lists the steps required to change a used product into an as-new product with at least equivalent performance and warranty of what might have been a new replacement product. And it's also plus all testing and certification required. So this is going to be a really interesting new standard. So that was a short whiz through some of the evolving metrics that we are all now being bombarded with. And I will be expanding on this list, and I will try to keep up with developments as they all gather speed. So I would now like to hand over to Kristina, who can really give you some very inside information on TM65 and 66. Over to you, Kristina.
Thanks, Helen. Hang on, right, share screen. Yes. Oh, hang on a minute. Oh, this is going to be interesting. I need to read my notes. Oh dear. Oh.
I would just proceed, Kristina, and you know, just do a full screen then. That works.
I need my notes. No, but I need what, like this?
Do with your notes, yeah.
Okay. Okay, that's oh no, hang on. Sorry, I thought I was going to be smooth at this. It turns out I'm. I'll be able to read what I'm saying though. That's the problem. I think
if you go to the two screens, can you get two screens up?
I can do. It's going to take a time. Arfon, would be maybe you ready to go if we swap?
Yeah, that's a good idea. Arfon, are you ready to roll?
Yeah, just give me 2 seconds.
I apologise. Sorry,
no worries, Christine. Yeah, what you could do is have your notes on one screen and then just the full screen on the other version. So Arfon, you're talking about really that, you know, the demands that you're making from manufacturers and the increasing questions that you're asking them in terms of the environmental impact of their luminaires, correct?
That is correct. Yes, you can you see my screen?
Yes, I can see your full screen now. Yeah.
Very good. And let me turn on my video. You see me okay as well?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, well, good morning to you, everybody. So I'm thanks for the introduction earlier on, Ray. So I'm Arfon. I'm the lighting design director for Arup, and I'm obsessed with lots of things actually, but at the minute I'm very obsessed with data. And I see quite a few people on the call who I've collaborated with, and so I apologize now for being rather persistent and maybe annoying, but it is for a real very important purpose. And so I'm going to talk about data, and actually I'll talk about the changing priorities of what I call lighting designers' decision making, how we need to make decisions differently, why we should make these decisions differently, and for what purpose. So yeah, so firstly, I think just want to quickly touch on why it is important that we are having this conversation, why Ray has organised this webinar. Helen kind of touched on it, and you know, I won't go into detail as to why it's important. We're all aware of the climate emergency. We're all probably living in local authorities that have declared a climate emergency. It's in the news all the time. But I thought I would just share some of these things that I've kind of touched on recently. I found recently that I thought, wow, you know, this is you know, interesting and quite impactful. Alan Belfield, our chairman, he came back from COP recently and talked to us about what he learned and what he found there. You know, and kind of well acknowledged discussions there and in the press about the impact of the built environment on greenhouse gas emissions. So we're contributing our work directly to more than a third of that, and that is having a very significant destabilizing effect on you know, on the planet and potentially the way that we live. What I thought was remarkable was that we've got such little information and awareness about the carbon emissions of our work. So only 1% of new projects that are delivered have any information about their carbon emissions. Only 1%. And when you think about that in the context of, you know, the significant impact of the built environment on carbon emissions, that's clearly not good enough. And in Arup, we've been talking about our carbon footprints, you know, our carbon emissions through our operations. You know, we don't fly around as much as we used to. I certainly don't, and neither do my team and neither do people in the firm. We are seeking to reduce our carbon emissions operationally. But what's really interesting, we've carried out some research, and we've found that our carbon handprints is substantially bigger. So our handprints being the impact of our work on carbon emissions in the built environment. So the projects that we design for our clients, 350 times that of our own carbon footprints. So, you know, our work has a very significant impact on the built environments and carbon emissions. And what I've been thinking about, actually, you know, what can we do differently? And, you know, actually, we've been designing blind, I think. Perhaps we haven't been focusing on the subject, but certainly we've been blind to the issue of carbon for a long time. And we've been blind and not had the information. And so that's why this information that we're sharing with you and the webinar in general is kind of really important to kind of open our eyes to what is a very urgent and important topic. So how have we been going about it? And how are we going about it in Arup, but also I think more generally in the lighting design fraternity, all the lighting design colleagues that I talk with. The Green Light Alliance has been mentioned, and it's very much a topic there as well. So what are we doing as a lighting design industry to respond to this challenge? What are we doing to try and change the way that we do things? And we do this, of course, really for the reasons I've just discussed, that we want to be making different decisions. We want to be informed by data, by information that perhaps we haven't considered before. And typically, perhaps maybe in lighting design circles, our kind of decision making, our product selections in the past perhaps have been prioritizing quality, and also, of course, considering cost and having that very delicate balance between quality and cost. But actually these days, it's more complex, I would say. So, in my team in Arup, we talk about the balance between the planet, between quality and cost. And increasingly so, we are thinking about prioritizing the planet over cost, over quality where we can, and where we're working with the right clients. And it's not an easy balance to make. But of course, that's kind of a really important change that I think we all really need to make. Within my team specifically, but in Arup more generally, we've made some quite significant commitments, I think, to try and change. And in my team, we talk about making a change towards lighting a low carbon future, as I call it. But we're doing a lot of things to try and do things differently. So, Helen has talked about life cycle assessment. So we, as a firm, made a commitment last year to carry out LCAs on all of our projects. So not just some, but all of them, 100% of them all the time. And that's what we are doing within the firm, but also in my team in lighting as well. And we do this because we recognize carbon as being a very significant contributor to making sustainable development a success. So carbon is a real focus for us. And in order for us to have that focus, to have that a part of our decision making, we need the data. We need information about carbon. We need information about environmental impact. And, as mentioned previously by Helen, we preferably would like an EPD, but sometimes they're not available for lots of the reasons you're all aware of. But when we don't have an EPD, we need the information about the product itself, the materials that are made to construct it, its country of origin, etc. And we can do some more work with that. But ultimately, we need this information because we want to, and we are calculating global warming potential for every single product that we are specifying. That's our aspiration. And in order to do that, of course, we need the data. And we're doing it because, as I mentioned earlier, we want to make decisions in a different way. So how do we then go about engaging with you, with manufacturers, with the industry to get this data, in the pursuit really of making these decisions differently? So we did them lots of different ways. We obviously have conferences like these, but then also we, as Ray mentioned, we are using Luminaire Broker to do this. And I'm sure hopefully most of you are aware of this, but if you're not, I'll just quickly introduce it. But we launched it 3 years ago now, almost, pretty much during the beginning of the pandemic, which is an interesting moment in time for all of us. But we launched it then, but then 12 months ago, we kind of made quite a significant upgrade to it. And we introduced quite a lot of information and data and collection and questions around the circular economy and carbon in general, which Helen's also touched on. So Luminaire Broker itself is a web-based collaboration tool. Essentially, we developed this to change the way that we specify products, to change the way that we engage with the market. So this slide kind of just shows you kind of where we were before. A lighting designer would think that they want a product, a downlight or a linear or whatever it may be. Then we would get, well, maybe I'm showing my age here, we would look at a lot of catalogs, which we don't have anymore, but we would look at Google, or we'd look at past emails, whatever it may be. We may email or call a supplier and make a decision, which would translate into a specification. That's the old days. These days, we use Luminaire Broker in that central section. So we have an idea, we engage with the markets substantially through Luminaire Broker, and then output from Luminaire Broker is a specification. This slide shows the kind of the workflow that we use in Luminaire Broker. So we would define a project at the beginning, and we would kind of define lots of different metrics around the project, where it's in the world, what type is it. Once we've done that, then we can then create a search or a query, as we call it, but this is essentially is a luminaire. And we can define our requirements in almost 80 different ways, lots of different things around quality, primarily, originally, color rendering, etc. We make this search, it goes out to industry, and then we get responses back from industry. And for some requests, we get many responses. We then shortlist them. We discuss with our clients and architects which would be the best choice for the product, for the project. We shortlist, and once we've selected the final thing, there's quite a lot of automation that occurs on our site then in terms of producing the specs that we send out to industry to quote against. So that is kind of the workflow of Luminaire Broker. What we introduced 12 months ago now was what we call the circular economy assessment, but it's a bit wider than that. Essentially, it's a series of 8 groups of questions that are very much inspired by TM66 and C Make, essentially very much coordinated with that. But we are asking questions around the circularity of products that are offered back to us, but we are also interested in carbon, EPDs, whole life cycle assessments. So we're kind of asking this of industry when we are making the requests. And I will then kind of share with you specifically, or more interesting, I think, for this sort of discussion, are the series of questions around certification and global warming potential. There are 3 of them. The first, I think, is around cradle to cradle, which Helen mentioned earlier also. And I would probably say probably less interesting probably to us at the moment in terms of kind of the carbon and the obsession with data that we have, but I'll share some information with you what we've had back. The second question we asked then is around the availability of EPDs or PEPs or life cycle assessments, and then the third one really then is kind of a more wider question around, are you able to support us to carry out global warming potential calculations? And so for the first time, actually, we've never shared this before. As a Luminaire Broker is all about transactions, is about data. So we have something that goes along with Luminaire Broker that we call Luminaire Broker Analytics, which we kind of talk to industry about as well, actually, as a service. But sharing with you here some of the responses we have got back from our requests to the questions on whole life cycle carbon, GWP, etc. As I shared with you, the 3 questions. And so since we launched it, and just thing to note as well is we don't make it, well, actually it is now, it wasn't when we launched a compulsory requirement for designers to ask the question. And so where we have asked the question, and since January last year, we've asked for almost 2,500 individual luminaires that have been requested. And so a few things to point out on this slide. One of them is that we've asked almost 2,500 times, and disappointingly, actually, 2,155 times, manufacturers haven't bothered to respond, which I don't know if that's a reflection on the interest in the industry or whether the industry simply don't have the information. I'm not sure, but there's quite a significant number of times we've asked where we haven't had the answer. But when we have had the answer, you can see here that, well, in terms of C2C, not particularly a lot of manufacturers able to provide that. So 89% almost of manufacturers responding to say that they can't offer a C2C. But more interesting to this conversation, I think, is the kind of response to the questions of, can you provide us an EPD or similar? And again, we see the same amount of people not responding, but for those who are responding, 61% of suppliers who have responded are not able to provide an EPD. Only 18% of them are able to provide one in full, and then decreasing percentages able to provide the kind of information that we would need about the components and materiality of the different elements, the country of origin, etc., in order for us to do the calculation. And similarly here, then the more detailed question about, can you give us the information so that we can carry out global warming potential calculations? And so here you can see similar percentage of manufacturers not able at the moment to provide that information. So I'll close then just by kind of giving you some examples of how we are using this information and how we are kind of changing the way we make our decisions to be more informed. So the first thing that we've developed a little while ago, and Ray mentioned Natalia, she'll talk at a future presentation. So she has developed for Arup globally, actually, what we call the global warming potential calculator. So we use this for our projects. So we can take data from an EPD to EPDs sometimes do not allow us to assess the whole life cycle carbon. There are some elements that are missing in some EPDs. And so we have the global warming potential calculator. So we can take data from an EPD, or if you have no EPD, but you've got some information about the materials of the products, we can actually calculate it as well in another version. But just to give you an example, sorry, Ray, I didn't know you were going to highlight that work Natalia's done, but she will show you in more detail soon. But this is the GU10 revelation that we found on a project recently. It's just an illustration perhaps of how we are using global warming potential carbon as a way to inform our decision making, and perhaps allowing us to make decisions that we wouldn't have made before. And so this illustration showing that a downlight with the GU10 has a lower carbon impact than one which we would traditionally assume to be the best option. And that would be an LED module with an associated driver. Finally, then, an illustration perhaps of where we have 4 products all coming back from Lumina Broker, all of them shortlisted, so they're fine from a quality perspective, they're fine from a budget perspective, but we have 4 Lumina choices, and we have then 2 alternatives for each one, and we are then calculating the global warming potential for each one, and we are then choosing the one with the lowest carbon impact. So again, allowing us to make decisions in a different way. So I'll close really with 2 slides, really just asking for help, and also, of course, offering our support in kind of helping us achieve kind of this mission, if you like. So the ask really is to please be prepared to give us the information when we ask for it, and be open and honest when it's not available. And if you don't have an EPD, that's no problem. We can work with you to kind of help calculate the global warming potential specifically of that product. But please engage with us as lighting designers, both in Arup but also in the community more widely. We want to make the right decision. We want to be making different decisions. But please know responses like we don't have the information, we don't have it now, that is not helpful. And we are very close, I think, in my team, to just discounting manufacturers that aren't able to give us the information that we need to make different decisions. My final slide then is one of my favorite quotes from Ellen MacArthur. I'll let you read this, but essentially it's very clear that we need to do things differently. As I keep saying, making different decisions, but informed by different data. And we need to do this, I think, really to help us respond to the climate emergency and all the chaos that's going on around us at the moment in terms of carbon and planetary challenges. So that's it from me. Thank you for listening, Ray. I think maybe, is it a good time now to hand back to Kristina?
Yes, over to Kristina now, and then we'll have some Q&A afterwards.
Cool, thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Arfon. And sorry about that just then. Right, I want to share this screen. Right.
That looks good. Yeah, and we can't see your notes, so thanks, Kristina.
You've got the big screen, lovely. All right, great. Hello. So hello, my name's Kristina Allison. I'm a senior lighting designer at Atkins Global in the London team. I'm also co-author of the CIBSE SLL document TM66, Creating a Circular Economy in the Lighting Industry, and soon to be released, CIBSE TM65, Embodied Carbon in Lighting Equipment. I'd like to give you a brief overview of the 2 metrics that I've been part of developing, what they offer designers and alike, and how they fit into the metric landscape for the lighting industry. But before we get into that, I want to remind ourselves why we need to do this and adjust the way we approach not just projects, but maybe life too. So these types of images are not unfamiliar, and they're shown to us regularly on the news or other forms of media. They tend to be used in an attempt to summarise the global warming situation. But unless you live in an area that has cyclones, forest fires, or extreme drought, it can be hard to appreciate the extreme weather changes that are happening in different areas of the world, how they affect us, and how we can do anything. So it can go over our head. It becomes overwhelming, and we can switch off to it all. But we can do our bit. So to help us put that into context of our jobs as lighting designers or lighting professionals, we can use guidance and tools to help us improve our approach and make us more effective at achieving designs with lower embodied carbon, with less environmental impact, and in fact have positive effects on our designs. I was thinking about the 4 most important elements that support the success of such guidance and tools, and I came up with this. Accessibility. These tools must be affordable and not too expensive, or they won't be adopted. They also need to be simple to use, or people just won't use them. Consistency. The output must give the results in an easy to follow and understand format, and use the same terminologies. Accountability. The results are only ever as good as the information provided, and therefore making sure the data is trustworthy and transparent gives the credibility needed for them to be used. And all of this is only achievable if we're working towards common goals. So collaboration is key. So with all this in mind, let's take a look at what metrics mean, more broadly speaking. We've all heard about LCAs and EPDs, but what exactly are they? Helen above has touched upon these. And if you've not heard of them before, this diagram created by Dr. Arena Mazai from Napier University will help. As I said, input data is critical to generating a truthful output, and in following the strict processes and rules for a life cycle analysis, LCA for short, a useful environmental product declaration, aka an EPD, will be produced. So who instigates an LCA? Well, a manufacturer usually, as they have all the information about their products, supply chain and manufacturing processes. Although clients and designers may request or require an EPD output for their project, we are seeing this happen more and more often, as Arfon was talking about. For example, a PEP, which stands for Product Environmental Profile, Eco Passport, is an example of a program operator that creates the EPDs following the processes prescribed in EN and ISO standards following the product category rules. The positives are these processes are thorough and provide an in-depth evaluation of a product, if you can afford them. The negatives are these assessments are expensive and take time to produce, making them not as accessible as we need them to be at this point in time. And sometimes the output can be different depending on who produced the EPD, making it hard to take a like-for-like view. So the use of CIBSE TM65 and TM66 methodologies can help. Both of these documents and supporting tools provides a reasonable output at a much lower cost and are faster to generate. This means that design decisions can be made faster. This is especially helpful when working towards net zero carbon building designs, and lighting is an energy using part of the design. And using these two tools in tandem is already happening, as is infographic from Stone Lighting proves, as they look to evaluate all of their product ranges right now and provide this data for their clients for their projects. So what is TM65 and TM66 then? TM65 is the CIBSE Technical Memorandum 65 on embodied carbon in building services. It's a methodology. TM66 is the SLL CIBSE guidance document and circular economy assessment method tool, or SAM for short. Essentially, this metric analyzes luminaires for their circular attributes and then gives them a score at the end of an assessment. Let's look at TM66 and the existing production model. Current manufacturer processes use the linear model of take, make, and waste, where materials are made into something. So in our case, a lamp or a luminaire, installed and used. And then at the end of their life or installation life, which could be way before the product's expected life, are just disposed of. This is a circular model. Once the luminaires have been used, they can be reused, refurbished, made into something else, or recycled. Preferably, the luminaire will remain in its primary form as a luminaire and upgraded when needed. Worst case is recycled, but the materials are kept at a high quality and not mixed with lower grade material. As a quick overview of the content of TM66, the document explains, encourages, gives business cases sector by sector, has case studies of early adopters, includes relevant legislation and frequently asked questions. The CIAM methodology makes understanding the circularity of a product much more manageable and simpler to understand. The CIAM Make tool has 66 questions covering 4 categories of product design, manufacturer, materials, and ecosystems. Both assessments, we also have a short form version of the tool called CIAM Specify with 23 questions covering the same 4 core criteria. For both assessments, each question in CIAM is scored out of 4, and depending on the amount and quality of circular economy evidence provided, the manufacturer during the assessment, and the score is given. A 0 score equals no evidence, up to a score of 4 equaling outstanding evidence. At the end of the CIAM assessment, we bring all of the results together in a summary and simply explain what the end number means. We show tab by tab results and then give an overall score accompanied by an easy to use red to green explanation of whether or not that score is good enough. TM66 will be expanded in the coming months to include documents for facilities managers, emergency luminaires, and also control equipment. We've listened to people using TM66 and CIAM who want to move forward. So this is hot off the press and it's just about to reach the peer review stage, but I'm delighted to share with you today that TM65 for embodied carbon in lighting equipment will, I hope, be published in spring 2023. The recurrent document, or parent document as we call it now, is written for MEP equipment in building services, and therefore there are many references and materials that are used which are not quite right for lighting and luminaires. The new features in TM65 for lighting equipment document and the tool will include how to understand embodied carbon for lighting designers, specifiers and electrical engineers, and also for manufacturers of lighting equipment. The document speaks to the lighting industry, so includes general and material acronyms and general definitions, again, associated to lighting. It has new materials added in the TM65 carbon calculator tool and will be a web-based tool as well. At the end of the document, there are case studies from 18 different manufacturers showing how the tool can be used in practice. We took a look at the life cycle stages of carbon within the BSEN 15978, as described in the TM65 parent document, and evaluated what was applicable to lighting. So what's changed? Well, we've included embodied carbon from a lighting perspective, the product and construction stages, A1 to A4, the in-use stage, B3 for repair, the end-of-life stages, C2 to C4, as you can see on the screen here. But remember, this isn't a life cycle analysis tool, but gives a very reasonable assumption as to the amount of embodied carbon equivalent within a luminaire or the lighting equipment. I mentioned 4 important things at the start of this presentation: accessibility, consistency, accountability, and collaboration. CIBSE has teamed up again with the LIA for a second joint venture offering and will provide third-party verification for both TM66 and TM65 assessments. These are not high-cost certifications, but enable the evidence and reference data to be evaluated and an independent body providing assurance that the products are what they've scored. So thank you. And if you are a member of the SLR or CIBSE, both of these documents are free to download. Well, TM65 isn't just it, but it's coming soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristina. Thank you for sharing that with us. Very interesting, and a bit of a big reveal today. So, is it called, by the way, is it called TM65.x? Is that, or will it get numbers?
No. At the moment, it hasn't got a number. You have to wait in line. So we'll see what the number will be. But the document will be called Embodied Carbon in Lighting Equipment. Yeah.
Okay, and I'd like to welcome Nigel Harvey, CEO of Light, to the panel. How are you doing, Nigel? What do you think of what you've heard this morning?
Thank you. It was really good to hear, and I think it was great also to hear our panelists put it in context of the climate emergency. And what you've all 3 of you done is basically helped us all collectively to act on, I think, what we should all be terrified of, the climate emergency, but you've converted that into tangible things that we can do in our day jobs to make a difference, because that quote from Ellen MacArthur was so clear. It's about reinventing how we do what we do, and I think you've started to give us some of the tools to enable us to do that, so thank you very much.
Now, a lot of the UK lighting industry is SMEs, owner operators, you know, a few million, you know, they don't have a compliance team, and they're looking at this webinar and they're probably may not be all that clearer than they were at 11 o'clock. So I'm going to come to you all in turn, and you know, and I am that guy who runs this firm. You know, we do our own stuff, we factor some stuff in, you know, and you know, what would be the priorities for a company like that? Because I'm thinking, do I have to go, if I want to sell to Arup, do I need to be cradle to cradle certified? Do I need to get all this paperwork? So I'm going to come to you, Arfon. First of all, apologies for stealing your thunder on the GU10 lamps story, which is fascinating. It'd be great to drill into that with Natalia later. But yeah, just my question to you is, you know, I'm a manufacturer, and look, I can't, the time or the money to deal with all this. What are the priorities to get me, you know, to get my products environmentally, the information on those?
Yeah, I suppose it's worth clarifying that, you know, we're not supporting any certification program. We are not requiring people to be C2C anything. We're not requiring people to have EPDs, but we are asking manufacturers to be able to have conversations with us about materials, circularity, and carbon. So for the example you gave, Ray, you know, an SME manufacturer who, you know, I understand, you know, the challenges around costs around EPDs, etc. If you are a small SME, you know, and you don't have any visibility of your supply chain, and I say visibility in terms of, you know, where are their materials coming from, or your product is substantially aluminium, for example, 75% is one material, you don't know what that element is, where it comes from, what the embodied carbon of that is, I would suggest that would be your priority. To be able to have a conversation with us about carbon, it's fine, it's okay if, you know, there are missing pieces. You know, we've got tools that can fill the gaps. We are very happy to do that. But that should be the area of focus. Start, I guess, with just having an awareness and be able to have the conversations. You know, too often, I'm afraid, we ask the question and we get the response saying we don't know, and we've got no intention of knowing.
So if you're an SME, you need to start asking questions of your supply chain. You know, this aluminium, how much is recycled, and where it's come from, etc., etc.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you know, and maybe, you know, think about the product range, the biggest component of it, the biggest piece of material in it, and start there. So, you know, and as soon as you start doing, you learn by doing, and then, you know, you're able to engage in conversation, and that's positive. It's positive movements.
Same question to you, Helen. You know, where do I start? What are the priorities?
Well, I think when I first started looking at some of these certification schemes and how you fill them out, they just seem terrifying. They seem overwhelming. And where do you find this information? But I had a really fascinating conversation with Simon Fisher, who was saying, like you were saying, Arfon, if your biggest component is aluminium, just weigh the aluminium. And he has got some multiplication factors that will then give you a rough carbon contribution from that aluminium. And you've now got a starting point. And I think it's trying to demystify it, bring it all down to the small components. Don't worry too much about all the tiny rare earth metals and things like that. Start with the big things and look through the information that you do already know. And a lot of it you will know. And start to build up the picture, and then fill in the finer details later. And if you need help, there's loads of people out there to help.
What would be a priority in terms of certification? So I want a piece of paper to say what's going on. I mean,
well,
what would...
a lot of them aren't certified yet. So most of them are, you're giving the information freely. It's not been verified by a third party. And I think that's where we have to start. Eventually it will come down to certification and people will want the reassurance that it has been checked. But to start off with, you are just providing information. So TM65 and TM66 don't need to be certified. There are people that will look at it and confirm what you've said. I think some of the harder ones, like cradle to cradle, do have to be verified. LCAs don't have to be verified, but an EPD does. So there's lots of different approaches. But if you are that small, that SME, start with the stuff where you can just provide the information. Like Arfon says, if you give him the data, he can then start utilizing that. And if he comes back and says he needs more, well, then you've got to put a bit more effort into it. But if you start and you just give them what you know in an honest and open way, you're halfway there.
And some of the stuff you can self-certify, you can just take, can't you?
Yeah.
Kristina?
Hi.
So yeah, so I mean, presumably you would be you would say, you know, the first things to look at is 66 and 65.
Yeah, no, for sure. In some ways, I mean, maybe some people need to take a step backward from those already, you know, and sort of like think about, you know, the reason that they want to be doing these sorts of assessments in the first place. I mean, this is where we started when we started writing these documents. It was from a place of kind of maybe a little bit of frustration, but just seeing what information there was available. I suppose as that side of things. I'm just picking up on something Helen just mentioned there about materials and weighing them and so on. So within TM65, which was, you know, only just recently finished, but we've included all of these case studies, like I say, from 18 different manufacturers, and it's not necessarily about the manufacturers, it's about the product types. You know, so we've got, you know, essentially 18 different types of products. And we're asking the manufacturers for material data, you know, and what was very, I guess, a surprise, I suppose, in some ways, like what was the most common materials used in luminaires? It was plastics, actually, and aluminium. And also the kind of the amount of recycled content of aluminium that was being used in products. So yeah, that was an interesting study. But again, I suppose that's kind of in depth quite a bit, and you wouldn't jump into that sort of level at the beginning, you know. This is where TM65 and TM66 can really kind of just support your ambitions, I suppose. Yeah, now I would obviously start there.
Okay, good. And Nigel, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, obviously, I don't have anything like the expertise that Helen, Arfon, and Kristina have. But I mean, if I was in an SME faced with the barrage of different specifications that are out there, I guess I'd look to two different sources. I'd look to some of the industry-leading competitors operating in the lighting industry who have got good sustainability credentials, have a view on what they are doing, and I would cling to my customers as well and find out what they are looking for and what they're likely to be looking for, and keep communicating with them, because they're the ones who are also going to drive some of the requirements that would be required.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. The manufacturers I talk to, they say, well, one thing they say is, you know, we're having a wait and see. Let's see which emerges. What, you know, they're looking for, clarity to emerge, and I'm not sure that's going to happen. And second of all, they're saying, well, you know, we're seeing what our customers want, and sadly, different customers may want different things, and so they're in this situation of which leads a little bit to inactivity, and they're asking for standardization. Lighting designers ask for the same things. So how do we surmount that?
Yeah, I think this, you know, let's wait and see, doesn't help move things forward. But if you start with the basics, if you start with TM65 and just seeing what your materials weigh, and giving that sort of data to people like Arfon, he can use that, and we've started the ball rolling. You know, it could be that later on down somebody says, oh, we need to know all about your corporate social responsibility, which is not part of TM66, but later on down the line somebody will ask you about that. So maybe then you've got to start looking at the other certifications and your EPDs and things, and start adding the information as it's asked for it. But do start with the basics.
Yeah, absolutely. I would kind of support that start small and grow from there. I think, yeah. Helen, I just wanted to kind of reflect on what you just said there about what's next. You know, and embodied suffering, something I've came across recently about kind of the social responsibility of products, or the kind of the embodied suffering that resides in the manufacturing process of products. That I think is coming too. And Ray, it'd be fantastic to have a webinar on that sometime in the future.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting as well, actually. Yeah. Kristina, just on, you know, if there's also a problem for global manufacturers where you've got Europe seem to going towards the PEP Eco Passport. You've got in the US, you've got the IALD working on an LCA incubator to come up with their own platform.
Yeah.
You've got the UK going towards 66 and 65. So we're getting this geographic imbalance, which is, you know, a bit of a head scratcher if you're a global brand.
Yeah, I mean, I've been speaking to the LCA incubator. So I think, like I say, collaboration is key. Just making sure you're kind of, I guess, in some ways on top of what's happening with all of them. It's still early days, isn't it? We don't really know which one is going to land on in the end and which one people are going to use. But I think, like Helen says, I mean, it's kind of no action isn't good enough, and I think we need to kind of at least be asking the questions for our projects about the products. So yeah.
The lesson is get the information together. Arfon.
Sorry, I'll raise my physical hand. Yeah, I think we're really blessed with the work that Kristina and Bob have done on TM65 and 66. It really, you know, I'm a kind of skills leader in Arup at the moment on lighting, and we have a global core. Brian Stacey's the kind of the US. Anyway, we talk about carbon and, you know, the things that I've been talking about, how we do things differently. And, you know, designers in the US aren't blessed like we are. And so they're saying, oh, we don't have TM65 and 66. What we don't have this. We can't do it. So my point to them is, you've got a framework, just use it.
Yeah.
You know, and so, you know, yeah, and you know, you've got to use what's available to you. And yeah, unfortunately, there isn't harmonization, and maybe we won't get there, but there's some good tools available now.
I think what's been quite encouraging, having, you know, been part of the LCA incubator conversations, is that, you know, they want to know about TM65 and TM66. So, I mean, obviously, I know I will always talk about these two documents. They are kind of very, very close to me. But you know, they're looking at them and saying, hey, hang on a minute, maybe we should be using those too. They might make up their own versions of them, but nonetheless, it's definitely kind of moved across the other side of the world, and they're talking about it. I was talking to somebody earlier this week, and people in Saudi are looking at TM66 as well, you know, so this is incredible, just you know, the reach of just the, if anything, just the conversation, you know. And again, when we started writing these things, it was really just about that. And I'm quite excited that, you know, that we're having the conferences happen, that we're having this discussion now, and yeah, it's moving and it's good.
Helen.
Yeah, I think, you know, there's all these people with different fingers in different pies, but the ultimate goal is for us all to get together. And I do think people will try and use information that's out there. I mean, I was really gratified when Briam and Well started using common data for the first parts of their certifications. So there's no reason why an LCA incubator couldn't use TM65 or TM66, so that the manufacturer, the producer, is always supplying the same information. It almost doesn't matter which certificate they fill it in on, so long as you get that information. And it's also going to be interesting to see what the PEP Eco Passport comes up with. You know, and Lighting Europe getting involved with that. It would be really nice if that's synchronized with TM65 and 66. And I believe there are quite a few people trying to push that.
That's a plea for standardization, if you will. Just to check a few.
Nigel raised his
hand. Sorry, Nigel. I was reading the Q&A at the time. Apologies.
I was going to say, arguably, there is a role for regulation in this, because the proliferation of specifications does cause problems for manufacturers. And whilst most industries are loath to sort of go to the government and say, please could you add regulation, nevertheless, in something like this, that may be the best solution, actually, to have one thing that is clearly mandatory, not just in the UK, hopefully in multiple trading blocks, and that would make everybody's life a lot easier.
Yeah.
Okay, let's take some questions. Matt Free is asking, who is policing an OEM's TM66 and 65 score? Is it a level playing field, Kristina? It's a self-certification, so people can be quite generous to themselves in certain questions.
They can be if they want to, but they'll get found out, I suppose, at some point in the future. But this is where the LIA third-party verification can come in and, in some ways, like you say, be the police. They're not expensive. They won't be expensive. That's the point of the, part of the process of TM65 and 66 is that they are accessible. And I mentioned that in the presentation, so affordability as well. So policing, I mean, they're not going to go around and just check everything, but, if somebody would like their self-certification to be third-party verified, that is coming soon. So, yeah.
And in fact, Nicolite is also going to offer a TM66 certification. So I wouldn't call it policing. It's simply providing our analysis of the data as presented to us, and say, based on the data presented, our opinion is your score is X. But as with any self-certification system, it's open to abuse, isn't it? And we've all known what the CE mark, now UKCA, could mean anything for some unscrupulous producers.
Mm-hmm. So it's a bit of an independent thing. Arfon.
Yeah, I think it's no different perhaps to the other metrics that we've all been familiar with traditionally, CRI, TM30, etc.
Yeah.
Things data we receive to make decisions. Ultimately, yes, we may be given deaf data once, but we'll learn a lesson and we won't be collaborating with that manufacturer again. Relationships, we are looking for relationships of trust and partnerships, really, and yeah. So yeah, some policing is good, but you can't police everything.
And let's try and take some quick questions. We have Jamie on our screen, got a couple of questions. Is there a date for the release of 65 for lighting, Kristina?
Wow, I'm hoping it will be in the next 3 months. I say, in the presentation, we've just sent it out for peer review, so that will take a period of time, and then it's the CIBSE editorial processes and so on. But yeah, like I say, I'm where are we? Oh gosh, already end of February. All right, so let's maybe think 2 or 3 months. Yeah, we'll go with that.
Okay, good. Okay, a couple of more quickies. Will bioplastics be included in 65?
Not in this first version. No, we've had to be quite strict about the changes that we're allowed to make, because like I said, we're making this sister document from the parent document. Things like recycled content of aluminium, these are things that we're hoping to include within the tool as well. So there are new materials coming into the carbon calculator.
And will there be a mechanism to input global warming potential for materials that aren't included?
To be decided.
To be decided. Okay, that's fine. Matthew Clark is asking, what carbon factor are you using for calculation of kilowatt hours? That was for you, Arfon, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah, there's an online tool available where you can put your country of origin and it will give you the carbon density. So it varies by country. I'll find it and put it in the chat, actually.
Oh yeah, okay, great. Eduardo Oliveira is asking, a lot of regulations happening in Europe, the US, UK. Do we know what regulations started to appear in the Middle East? And so any thoughts on that? I'm hearing people talk about TM66 in the Middle East, Kristina.
Well, I mean, this might help you a little bit. So later this afternoon, I'll be doing a similar presentation as I've done this afternoon for women in lighting, and they'll be sharing that across the world as they do. So like you say there, Ray, I think people are talking about TM66 in the Middle East, and I'll be sharing, just like I have done today, about TM65, and when that's released, we'll be able to share more about that as well. So what they are talking about, I guess they're looking to us for what we're doing. So maybe that's what they're doing.
And of course, LEED and Esidama are all big over there, aren't they? Arfon, do you have much work over there?
Sorry, forgive me, Ray. I was
talking about, oh, sorry, I was distracting you. I was just distracting you. Apologies.
It's electricitymaps.com is where you need to go to find out the carbon density of energy. Were you asking me a question, Ray? Or
yes, I was. I was just asking about Eduardo Oliveira was asking about regulations, environmental regulations in Middle East, and about, you know, will these sort of metrics start to get purchased over there, etc.
Yeah. Yes, yeah. I mean, it varies in the Middle East. Sometimes we see clients embracing European, sometimes US. It depends. We don't really see too much coming down from, from government, let's say. But yeah, no, they are there, and sometimes it's up to us as designers to bring those requirements forward rather than being told by clients that this is what you need to do. We would say on projects that this is what we think you should be doing.
Good. So Kristina, what sort of measures, I mean, apart from filling in, what would be the sort of priorities that people could do to improve their scores? What would be like the easy wins, or are there things in easy wins where you could really get your metrics? And I know people get obsessed about transportation of this product, these components that come from along, but in fact that doesn't actually translate into big wins. It's more than that, isn't it?
Well, how do you get big wins? In which ones? 65 or 6?
Well, across the board in environmental impact, of your luminaires. Where should people start? And you've talked about plastics. Is that the priority area?
Well, I mean, I guess it's thinking about different types of materials. I mean, somebody in the chat has talked about like bioplastics. I mean, one of the case studies that we've got in CM65 looks at, wooden luminaires, and I've seen a Fagerholt luminaire recently that is a wooden luminaire. So I guess it's maybe looking at product design at the beginning, I suppose, to sort of say, like, right, what materials are we using? What recycled content of, like I say, aluminium is possible? I was surprised to find out how many different varieties of plastics are used in lighting. That's a problem. So I suppose in some ways that would be something I would like to see kind of, I guess, harmonized a little more. So luminaires could be really kind of chucked in one plastic recycling bin, for example, whereas now you probably have to have 15 plastic recycling bins if you kind of take that view on what I'm talking about. Helen, yeah.
Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you, but I also feel, of course, the big move, the big driver at the moment is recycling a whole product, the regeneration of a lighting product. And I know there's we read on LinkedIn and in the press about how many projects are now using old luminaires and upcycling them and refurbishing them, and I think that's probably one of the trends that's going to grow even more. And
that's an interesting
cope with it.
Yeah, that's an interesting point there, because I mean, things like refurbishing essentially is what you're talking about in a way, is the safety element that comes along with that, and I think we perhaps need to kind of get ourselves kind of in line, or understand how we certify luminaires that have gone for refurbishment, just to make sure they're safe, because I think, like you also touched, I think, on there the safety bill as well.
The BS 8887 will detail all of that, and that's very close. I've got a meeting about that next week. That's coming up very soon as well. So when you've got a standard that's saying what your minimum requirements must be for a regenerated, recycled, whatever we want to call it, revamped luminaire, and then also it will need testing, it will need a CE mark, it will need photometric testing, it will need all of those types of things, which has got to be factored into the price of recycling a luminaire as well.
Can I pick up on that and just ask Arfon, because I was really thrilled to hear some of the requirements, the questions you're asking now. I wonder, are you also or yet thinking about remanufactured fittings as well?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a case study actually in the TM actually about our Leeds office retrofit, but we're doing it quite across our estate at the moment. In fact, our office in London, we will soon be doing something with the office lighting there. So yeah, absolutely, Nigel. And sometimes the conversation with clients, you know, when they come to us saying they want a building, actually sometimes we say, do you actually need a building in the first place? You know, if they say they do, then the conversation then is, well, how can you repurpose what you've already got or reposition? And then that includes the lighting, definitely. You know, and as Helen and Kristina just said, it's, you know, it's not precisely clear how one should go about doing that safely and properly. But, you know, yeah, I mean, CE marking, doing what we would normally do, I suppose. We might look at a refurbished product exactly the same way as we would see a new product in terms of certifications, testing, you know, requirements, maybe CE marks. But yeah, absolutely, Nigel, it's a very important, you know, feature of our work going forward. Yeah, Kristina.
I'm just going to say, like, as one of the tabs, like the 4th tab in CM66, we talk about the ecosystem that surrounds the products, you know, and it's about the, I guess, the supporting businesses that will pop up. So there's so many, I mean, I've seen so many businesses that are kind of aligning themselves with CM66, but also just other things that will essentially kind of look at product certification for refurbished luminaires as well. So it might not exist today, but it might do in 6 months, it might do in 1 month, but, you know, yeah, go on.
Sorry. I just wanted to say, because I thought it's interesting. What's interesting at the moment, though, Nigel, is when we have a project, you know, and it's a new build. Okay, so it's not refurb, but it's a new build. That's basically what the client we've decided to do. But then what we're not doing at the moment is thinking about how we might use someone else's luminaire that they no longer want. You know, there have been some interesting conversations we've had about maybe how we might do that, but that's, you know, Simon's on the call, I've seen in the chat there, you know, so, but, you know, we're keen to explore that more, actually, but that's really, to me, it's quite tricky at the moment. But
agreed,
yeah.
It is quite tricky, but I think there's a number of things that we can do collectively as an industry to make that more achievable. In fact, that's why we're running that one-day conference in April that Ray mentioned at the beginning, because there is a lot that can be done to make reuse more of a reality in the lighting industry, and it's really probably one of the most effective ways of reducing embodied carbon actually is to reuse the majority of the fitting that's already there, and a bad outcome, let's face it, is recycling them. And I'm talking as the manager of a recycling scheme. You know, it is much better to reuse them rather than recycle. Recycling should be the last ditch option, not the first ditch option.
Yeah.
And I think on our webinar on the 18th of May, we're talking about Cat A, and when we're taking luminaires out of Cat A, how do we get those reused, and how do we close that loop so that they come back into the stream? Christine, currently, if I'm selling a reconditioned luminaire, it's 8887, we're warrantying, and we put a CE mark on it and everything, and I put it through TM66, I don't really get rewarded for that, do I really? Shouldn't I get spectacular marks because this is the luminaire that's had a life and we're bringing it back into, or?
Oh, that's interesting, isn't it? I don't know the actual answer to that.
For saying this is reused, this is a product that's you know, would that come in a future version, perhaps?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, this is where we are with TM66 at the moment, isn't it? We set out our beta version, right, and it will be revised. The questions will be looked at again, and we will probably look to sort of include more positive results, if you like, you know, that do give the highest scores for that. I mean, if anything, thinking about it, should get that just outstanding straight away. You know, think about, hey, I used to already exist. Good for you, well done. There's an outstanding result, you know. I don't think you get any higher than already existing beforehand, but yeah, like you say, it needs to have a fair assessment at the end of it. So we'll take that on board, I think, and make sure that can be captured.
There'll be a level of complexity, I presume. So somebody's really using a die cast, or they're reusing an element of a luminaire.
Well, this is interesting you say that, actually, thinking about it, because when using TM66, but then also TM65 in tandem, you might actually be able to kind of come around those sorts of questions and give the result maybe not fully in TM66, because like you say, but the embodied carbon of a product itself, you could perhaps value, it could be highly valued on that side, if you like. So yeah, no, that's a bit of a head scratcher in some ways, but I think there's ways to incorporate that.
And often, what reaction are you getting from clients when you raise the prospect of reconditioned luminaires? Are they appalled? Do they welcome it from a net zero point of view, or we still stuck that people want, showpiece signature stuff, and they want to sort of, flaunt their
Yeah, I mean, it depends. It's a fairly easy conversation to have when we're dealing with an existing asset with some, really interesting, we're working on the Printworks at the moment, for example, that has some really interesting heritage kind of, these things are inherent in the architecture. Yeah, I mean, it's really, when you've got a new build, it's really tricky. We've not succeeded with it at the moment. It's not from, lack of wanting. Clients are interested. Yeah, I mean, the reason why we are having this conversation is because we think it's the right thing to do, but also because our clients are pushing us, they want it, and so yeah, they're very interested when we make the suggestion. We just haven't found the right project yet, because every project's different. But no one's appalled by the idea. Most people think that's really quite interesting.
But if there was big wins in terms of your lead or your neighbors or any of the other, or your well standard for doing that, I mean, that would make it even more attractive, wouldn't it?
It would, yeah. I mean, maybe I'll say something stupid by saying, design's not about following standards, and some other talks I've given years ago, I kind of suggested you throw stuff in the bin to start with. Standards go in the bin, and you think about design from an experience and people perspective, and now you think about it from a planetary perspective. But you just know it's the right thing to do to reuse a product. No, it's just sensible. It doesn't have to be a standard to tell you, you'll get well credits because of X, Y, and Z. It's just the right thing to do.
It's a mind shift change, isn't it?
Yeah, it is indeed, and that's a great point to end on. All these standards and all these acronyms are there. Well, let's not lose sight of the big picture, the creativity, making great spaces for people. That's what the lighting industry is at the end of the day. We're going to wrap up there. Please join us on our future webinars or on the remanufacturing conference, and indeed, and also the Circular Lighting Live in September. We'll hopefully see you at those. Thank you for all your quite thought-provoking presentations and chat today. Arfon, Kristina, Helen, and Nigel, thank you so much.
And I'll just say thank you very much on behalf of Recolite to you, Ray, for hosting the event, and also a particular mention for Kristina and Bob Bohannon, who did so much work on TM65 and 66, of which have been the core of much of our discussions. So thank you very much.
They have indeed.
Thank you.
Okay, cheers, bye. Thanks very much. Bye now.
Bye.